The rain came without warning that afternoon, turning the cobblestones of London into mirrors that reflected a grey sky grown suddenly hostile. Amelia Blackthorne had been walking along the quieter streets near Bloomsbury, her thoughts occupied with mundane concerns: the cost of new gloves, the invitation she'd declined from Mrs. Weatherby, the letter she needed to write to her cousin in Bath. She had not expected the heavens to open with such fury, nor had she anticipated that her careful plans would dissolve as quickly as the ink on the shopping list now crumpled in her reticule. The ancient stone building appeared before her like a sanctuary, its arched doorway offering shelter from the deluge. Amelia rushed toward it, her skirts growing heavy with rainwater, her bonnet listing dangerously. She pressed herself against the weathered doors, breathing hard, watching the rain create rivers in the streets. It was then she noticed she was not alone. He stood at the opposite side of the doorway, perfectly still, as though carved from the same stone as the building itself. His coat was dark and well-tailored, but without ostentation, his posture erect yet somehow relaxed. What struck Amelia most was not his appearance, though he was undeniably handsome in that severe classical way that reminded her of marble statues, but rather the quality of his attention. When he looked at her, it was neither presumptuous nor dismissive. It was simply present. "Quite a storm," he said, his voice low and measured. There was something in his tone that suggested he was accustomed to speaking and being heard, yet he made no effort to command the space between them. "Yes," Amelia replied, suddenly conscious of her bedraggled state. She attempted to straighten her bonnet, then gave up the endeavour as hopeless. "I confess I was unprepared for such weather." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. London has a particular talent for catching us unprepared. They fell into companionable silence, watching the rain together. Amelia found herself studying him from the corner of her eye. There was something unusual about him, though she could not quite identify what it was. His clothes, while fine, bore no obvious markers of extreme wealth. His manner was courteous, but not obsequious. He did not introduce himself, nor did he ask her name. In the ordinary course of things, such an omission would have been strange, even improper. But here, sheltered from the storm in this forgotten corner of the city, normal rules seemed suspended. "Do you often find yourself caught in the rain?" he asked after a moment, and there was something almost playful in the question. "More often than I would like," Amelia admitted. "My practical nature seems to desert me when I'm lost in thought. I walk without noticing the sky, and then find myself in predicaments like this one." "What occupies your thoughts so completely?" The question was direct, yet somehow not intrusive. Amelia considered deflecting it with polite nonsense, but found herself answering honestly instead. "Everything and nothing, the small architecture of daily life, the letters that need writing, the books that need reading, the conversations that replay themselves in endless variations. Do you never find your mind wandering in such ways?" "Constantly," he said, and there was such genuine feeling in the word that Amelia turned to look at him fully for the first time. His eyes were remarkable, grey like the storm clouds, but with flecks of something lighter that might have been humour or might have been sadness. "Though I confess my wanderings are often an escape rather than a journey." "An escape from what?" He hesitated, and Amelia saw something shift in his expression, a brief glimpse of weight that he carried. "From expectations," he said finally. "From the roles we are assigned before we are old enough to question them." Before Amelia could respond, the rain intensified, sheets of water now pouring from the eaves above them. They pressed closer to the doors, and in doing so, moved closer to each other. Amelia was aware of his height, his proximity, the scent of wool and soap and something else, perhaps pine or cedar. "I should introduce myself," she said, because the moment seemed to require some acknowledgement of propriety. "I am Miss Amelia Blackthorne." "Alfred," he said simply, offering his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Blackthorne." She placed her gloved hand in his, noting the firmness of his grip, the way he held her gaze. There was no title attached to his name, no elaborate presentation, just Alfred. It felt oddly intimate, this simplicity between them. "And what brings you to this particular corner of London, Alfred?" she asked. "Avoidance," he said, with that same hint of dry humour. I had an appointment I was not eager to keep, and I'm afraid I took rather a long route to delay my arrival. Now the storm has given you a legitimate excuse for your tardiness. Precisely, though I suspect my explanation will be met with skepticism. He glanced at the rain, then back at her. What of you? Were you also engaged in avoidance? More like pursuit, Amelia said. I was seeking a particular bookshop that I'd heard carried rare volumes. I wanted to surprise my father with a first edition of Wordsworth for his birthday. A noble quest. Did you find it? I did not. I became lost, as usual, and then the rain began. Alfred was quiet for a moment, considering. Then he said, I know the area reasonably well. When the rain subsides, I could direct you there, or accompany you, if that would not be too presumptuous. There was something in his offer that went beyond mere politeness. Amelia sensed that he was as reluctant to part company as she was, though neither of them had any rational reason for such reluctance. They had known each other for mere minutes. They stood in the rain like children hiding from their tutors, and yet there was a connection between them that felt both fragile and essential. I would be grateful for the company, she heard herself say, and watched something like relief cross his features. The rain did not subside quickly. If anything, it seemed determined to keep them exactly where they were. Alfred asked about her life with genuine curiosity. Amelia found herself telling him about her father, a scholar devoted to studying medieval manuscripts who had passed his love of learning to his daughter. She spoke of her mother, gone these 5 years, whose absence had left a silence in their household that neither she nor her father had quite figured out how to fill. In turn, Alfred spoke carefully, revealing himself in layers. He mentioned obligations that weighed on him, decisions that others expected him to make, a life that often felt choreographed by invisible hands. When she asked about his family, he grew quieter still, saying only that he had lost his parents young and had been raised with a strong sense of duty that sometimes felt more like imprisonment. Do you ever wish you could simply walk away? Amelia asked. Start over somewhere no one knows you. Every day, he said, and the admission seemed to surprise him, though I suspect that even if I did, I would carry my obligations with me. They're not external, you see. They've become part of who I am. That sounds terribly sad. Does it? He considered this. Perhaps. But there's also something to be said for knowing one's place in the world. Even if that shape doesn't fit you properly. Alfred smiled at that, a real smile that transformed his face. You have a way of asking uncomfortable questions, Miss Blackthorne. My father always said it was my most annoying quality. I find it rather refreshing. The conversation flowed between them with an ease that Amelia had rarely experienced. There were no awkward silences, no fumbling for topics. Alfred listened with complete attention, and when he spoke, his words were thoughtful, considered. As the afternoon wore into early evening, the rain finally began to ease. The relentless downpour softened to a steady drizzle, and the sky brightened slightly. I suppose we should venture out before it begins again, Alfred said, though he made no move to leave. I suppose we should, Amelia agreed, equally motionless. They stood there for another moment, neither quite willing to take the first step. Then Alfred offered his arm, a gesture so natural that Amelia took it without hesitation. They emerged into the wet streets, their footsteps splashing in puddles. Alfred guided her through the maze of streets with confidence. They turned down narrow lanes and crossed small squares, and all the while they continued talking. Amelia learned that Alfred had a passion for architecture, that he could identify the age of a building by the style of its windows. He pointed out details she had never noticed, the way certain door frames bore the marks of centuries-old craftsmanship, the small gargoyles hidden in eaves, the faded paint on shop signs that revealed earlier incarnations. You see the city differently than most people, Amelia observed. Perhaps because I'm looking for something beyond what's immediately visible, he said. The stories embedded in stone and mortar. They reached the bookshop as twilight began to settle. The shop was small and crammed with volumes that spilled from shelves onto tables and into precarious stacks on the floor. An elderly man looked up from behind the counter as they entered. Welcome, he said. How may I assist you? Amelia explained what she sought, and the shopkeeper's eyes lit with enthusiasm. He disappeared into the back while Amelia and Alfred browsed the shelves. "Your father is fortunate to have such a devoted daughter," Alfred said quietly. "He has given me everything," Amelia replied. "This is a small token in return." The shopkeeper returned triumphant, carrying a first edition in remarkably good condition. Amelia drew in her breath, calculating whether she could afford it. The price was steep, but not impossible. She would need to forego new gloves for another season, but her father's face would be worth any sacrifice. As she counted out coins, she was aware of Alfred watching her with an expression she could not quite read. There was something tender in it, something almost wistful. When the transaction was complete, they emerged back into the evening air. "Thank you for your help," Amelia said, clutching the package. "I never would have found this place on my own." "It was my pleasure," Alfred said sincerely. "Miss Blackthorne, I wonder if I might impose upon you for one more moment." "Of course." He seemed to struggle with what he wanted to say. "This has been one of the most unexpectedly pleasant afternoons I can remember. I find myself reluctant to let it end. Would you allow me to call on you? Properly, I mean. At your home, with your father's permission." Amelia's heart did something complicated in her chest. Of course there would have to be formality, propriety, the intrusion of the real world, and yet she wanted to see him again. "I would like that," she said carefully, "though I should warn you that our household is quite modest." "I don't require fashion," Alfred said simply. "I require only your company." They arranged the particulars. Amelia gave him her address. Alfred promised to call within the week. As they spoke, Amelia noticed a carriage approaching, moving with purpose. Alfred saw it too, and something shifted in his demeanor. The easy openness was suddenly veiled. The carriage stopped beside them, and a footman descended. Through the window, Amelia glimpsed an older man with a stern expression. "I'm afraid I must go," Alfred said, genuine regret in his voice. "But I will call on you soon. That is a promise." "I'll look forward to it," Amelia said, though she felt strange unease. He took her hand, raising it briefly to his lips, in a gesture both courtly and intimate. "Thank you for this afternoon, Miss Blackthorne. You have given me something I did not know I needed." Before she could ask what he meant, he was inside the carriage and the door was closing. The carriage rolled away into the gathering darkness. Amelia stood on the wet street, clutching her book, feeling as though she had just awakened from a dream. She walked home slowly, replaying every moment in her mind. There was something about Alfred that puzzled her, the fine carriage, the footman, the mysterious appointment. These details suggested a life more complex than he had revealed. Yet when they had stood together in that doorway, none of it had seemed to matter. Her father was in his study when she arrived, surrounded by manuscripts. He looked up as she entered, his face breaking into a warm smile. "Amelia, my dear, I was beginning to worry. Did you get caught in that dreadful storm?" "I did," she said, setting the wrapped book on his desk. "But I also found something I think you'll appreciate." Her father unwrapped the volume with reverence, his eyes widening. "Oh, my dear child, this is far too extravagant. Nonsense, your birthday deserves something special. But the expense is already forgotten," Amelia said firmly. "Besides, I had an adventure acquiring it. I got lost, found shelter from the rain, met a fascinating stranger, and was guided to a remarkable bookshop." Her father studied her face with perceptive gaze. "This stranger," he said carefully. "Should I be concerned?" "Not at all. He was perfectly proper. In fact, he asked permission to call on me. I gave him our address." "Did he indeed?" Her father set down the book. "And what is this gentleman's name?" "Alfred," Amelia said, then realized she knew nothing else about him. No surname, no profession, no family connections. "Just Alfred?" "We didn't stand much on formality." Her father looked as though he wanted to say more, but instead he simply nodded. "Well, I look forward to meeting this mysterious Alfred." The week that followed was peculiar in its ordinariness. Amelia went about her usual routines, yet underneath the familiar patterns, she was aware of a new current of anticipation. Every knock at the door made her heart leap. Alfred did not call. 2 days passed, then 3, then 4. Amelia told herself she was being foolish, that an afternoon spent sheltering from the rain did not constitute a binding social commitment. Perhaps he had thought better of his promise. Perhaps the mysterious life he had hinted at had reasserted its claims, yet she could not quite convince herself. The connection she had felt had been too strong, too immediate. Alfred had been genuine in his interest, she was certain of it, which meant something had happened to prevent him from keeping his word. On the 5th day, Amelia decided to stop waiting. She had a life to live that did not revolve around a man she barely knew. She made plans to visit her cousin in Bath. She threw herself into helping her father. She even accepted an invitation from Mrs. Weatherby to attend a small gathering. The gathering was held in Mrs. Weatherby's overstuffed parlour, crowded with people who thrived on gossip. Amelia found herself trapped by Miss Penelope Hart, whose primary occupation seemed to be cataloguing scandals. "Have you heard about the Duke of Ashford?" Miss Hart said, leaning close conspiratorially. "They say he's finally going to choose a bride. His advisors have been pressuring him for years, but now there's talk he's been seen in public more frequently." Amelia murmured something polite, only half listening. She had no interest in the romantic entanglements of dukes. "They say he's impossibly handsome, but absolutely terrifying," Miss Hart continued. "All that power and wealth and such a serious disposition. They call him the Stone Duke because he never shows emotion, though of course for a chance at that title and fortune, half the women in London would gladly marry a statue." "Perhaps the Duke values more than mere appearance in a potential wife," Amelia suggested. Miss Hart laughed. "Oh, Miss Blackthorne, you're so wonderfully naive. Men of that station don't marry for compatibility. They marry for alliance, for property, for producing heirs." The conversation moved on, but Amelia found herself thinking about Miss Hart's words. She thought about Alfred, about the way he had spoken of duty and expectations, of feeling imprisoned by assigned roles. It was this thought that occupied her as she made her way home through the evening streets. The air was cool and clear, nothing like the rain-heavy afternoon when she had met Alfred. She was so lost in thought that she nearly collided with a figure standing outside her door. She looked up, an apology forming, and found herself staring into familiar grey eyes. "Alfred," she breathed, shock and relief flooding through her. He looked different somehow. The easy informality was gone, replaced by something more formal, more constrained. He was dressed more elegantly, his bearing unmistakably aristocratic, and he was not alone. Behind him stood a stern-faced man in livery. "Miss Blackthorne," Alfred said, his voice weighted with things unsaid. "I apologize for calling at such an hour. I tried to come sooner, but circumstances prevented me. Might I speak with you? With your father present, of course." "Of course," Amelia said, though her mind was reeling. They went inside and her father emerged from his study, clearly surprised. Amelia performed introductions, noting that Alfred still gave no surname, just Alfred as before. Yet now that omission felt less intimate and more ominous. They sat in the small parlour, an awkward silence stretching between them until Alfred finally spoke. "I owe you an explanation for my delay," he began, addressing himself primarily to Amelia's father. "I intended to call much sooner, but events intervened that required my immediate attention. Matters of responsibility that I could not set aside." "We quite understand," Amelia's father said, though his eyes were sharp with assessment. "Yes," Alfred said, and something in that single word carried weight. He turned to Amelia now, and she saw regret in his face and something that looked like pain. "Miss Blackthorne, our meeting in the rain was one of the most genuine experiences I have had in many years. When I was with you, I felt like myself in a way I rarely do. You asked me questions no one else dares to ask. You saw me without any of the trappings that usually define how people see me." "I don't understand," Amelia said, though a cold suspicion was beginning to form. Alfred stood, began to pace. "When we met, I did not tell you everything about myself. It was not precisely deception. I told you no lies. But I omitted certain truths. I told you my name was Alfred, which it is. I did not tell you that my full name is Alfred James Montclair, Duke of Ashford." The world seemed to tilt slightly. Amelia heard her father's sharp intake of breath, saw the servant in the hallway straighten. The Duke of Ashford, the Stone Duke, the most powerful unmarried nobleman in England. "I see," Amelia said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded when everything inside felt like it was crumbling. I did not intend to mislead you, Alfred continued, words tumbling faster. When we met, it was such a relief to be seen simply as a man. No one bowing, no one calculating what they might gain, no one treating every word as though it were carved in stone. You spoke to me as an equal. Do you have any idea how rare that is? So you let me believe you were someone you were not, Amelia said. The hurt was sharp, unexpected in its intensity. I let you see who I am beneath the title, he corrected gently. Everything I told you was true. My feelings about duty and obligation, my desire to escape expectations, all of that was genuine. The only thing I concealed was a name that comes with so much weight it obscures everything else. Amelia's father cleared his throat, cutting through the tension. Your Grace, perhaps you could explain the purpose of this visit. My daughter deserves to understand your intentions. The Duke turned to face Amelia's father directly, assuming the mantle of his position, his posture straightening, his expression becoming more formal. I came to apologize for the delay in calling and to ask permission to continue my acquaintance with Miss Blackthorne. I realize that the disparity in our stations makes this highly irregular, but I cannot pretend that our meeting meant nothing to me. And what exactly are your intentions toward my daughter? Her father's voice was carefully neutral, but Amelia could hear the steel beneath it. To know her better, the Duke said simply. Beyond that, I cannot make promises. There are expectations placed upon me, pressures from advisers and peers. I'm expected to make a match that benefits my estates, that strengthens political alliances. But I am also a man who, for one afternoon, remembered what it was to feel something genuine. How noble of you, Amelia said, bitterness creeping into her voice. You wish to explore where genuine feeling might lead, while keeping in reserve all the proper matches your advisers have lined up. I am to be your experiment in authenticity. The Duke flinched. That is not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Amelia stood, facing him across the small room. You speak of complications and expectations, of pressures from advisers. You speak of everything except what you actually want. So tell me plainly, Your Grace, why are you here? The formality of the title was deliberate, a barrier she was erecting. She saw him recognize it, saw him understand what she was doing. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he crossed the room until he stood directly before her. I am here because I cannot stop thinking about you, he said, his voice low and intense. Because every conversation I have had since that afternoon has felt hollow in comparison. Because when I close my eyes, I see you standing in that doorway asking me uncomfortable questions and looking at me as though I were simply Alfred. I am here because you made me want to be brave enough to choose what I want, rather than what is expected. The air between them felt charged. Amelia was acutely aware of her father's presence, of the servant watching from the hall, of all the reasons why this was impossible. Yet she was also aware of her own racing heart, of the way her body swayed slightly toward his. And what do you want? She asked quietly. You, he said. I want you. The word hung between them, simple and devastating. Amelia felt her resolve wavering. Your Grace, her father said, his voice cutting through the tension, I think it would be best if you left now. My daughter needs time to consider what you have told her, and you, perhaps, need time to consider what you are truly offering. The Duke stepped back, the spell broken. He nodded to Amelia's father with clear respect. You are right, of course. I apologize for the lateness of the hour and the abruptness of this revelation. He turned back to Amelia. Miss Blackthorne, I hope you will forgive my deception or at least understand it. If you are willing, I would very much like to call again, properly this time. I need to think, Amelia said, which was not agreement, but not refusal either. Of course. He bowed formally, then left with his servant following. Through the window, Amelia watched him climb into an elaborate carriage bearing the Ashford arms. When the carriage had rolled away, her father spoke. Amelia, my dear, come sit with me. She sank onto the settee beside him, suddenly exhausted. Her father took her hand. That was quite an eventful encounter, he said with characteristic understatement. He lied to me, father. Did he? Or did he simply not tell you something you had no reason to expect? Amelia wanted to be angry, but her father's logic was difficult to refute. He let me believe he was someone ordinary. And in doing so, he gave you both something rare, a chance to meet as equals. Can you truly blame him for wanting that? No, Amelia admitted. But what does it matter what he wanted? He is the Duke of Ashford. I am the daughter of a scholar. The world will never allow us to simply be Alfred and Amelia. Her father was quiet, considering. The world has very firm opinions about what is allowed. But the world is made of individuals, each of whom must decide whether to accept those opinions or challenge them. The Duke came here tonight, which suggests he is considering a challenge. Or he came to see if the novelty still appealed. Perhaps, her father conceded, or perhaps he meant every word. Only time will reveal which is true. But Amelia, I must ask, what do you want? Amelia thought about that afternoon in the rain, about the ease of their conversation, the way Alfred had looked at her. She thought about his confession tonight, the vulnerability in his voice. She thought about the weight he carried, the expectations that pressed down on him. I want to see him again, she said finally. Not the Duke of Ashford, Alfred, the man who stood with me in the rain. Then perhaps you should give him that opportunity, her father said gently, though I caution you to guard your heart. The path he has hinted at will not be easy. Over the next days, gifts began arriving. First came flowers, massive arrangements unlike anything their modest household had received. The note was brief. Forgive me for not bringing these last night. I was too preoccupied with seeing you. A. 2 hours later, a second delivery arrived, a book carefully wrapped. A collection of Wordsworth's letters, rare and beautifully bound. The note read, "For the woman who seeks rare volumes for those she loves. Perhaps you might find something here for yourself." A. On the third day came something more unusual, a detailed architectural drawing of the stone doorway where they had first met. At the bottom, the most important threshold I have ever crossed. Amelia stood holding the drawing, feeling something in her chest loosen. These gifts showed that Alfred had been paying attention. He remembered her love of books, her questions about architecture. He was courting her not with wealth but with attention. On the fourth day, Alfred himself arrived. He was dressed less formally, more like the man from the rain. When Amelia's father admitted him, Alfred bowed respectfully but without excessive formality. "Mr. Blackthorne, Miss Blackthorne, thank you for receiving me." "Your gifts have been most thoughtful," Amelia's father said. "Please sit." "I understand your concern, sir," Alfred said, settling on the edge of his chair. "I have spent the last few days thinking about this situation. I have consulted with my advisors, though I did not heed their advice. I have weighed my obligations against my desires, and I have concluded that I cannot let fear prevent me from pursuing something that matters." "You speak as though your mind is made up," Amelia said, "but you have not said exactly what you have decided." Alfred turned to face her fully. "I have decided that I want to know you better, not through brief chaperoned visits where we must perform for propriety's sake. I want real time together, conversations like the one we had in the rain. I want to understand your mind, your passions, your dreams." "That sounds lovely in theory," Amelia said carefully. "But in practice, how would such a thing be possible? You are one of the most watched men in England." A smile tugged at Alfred's lips. "I have given that considerable thought. I own a small estate in the countryside, about 2 hours from London. I rarely visit it, so it attracts little attention. I propose that you and your father come there as my guests for a fortnight. You will have your own chambers, and your father will serve as chaperone. The isolation will allow us to spend time together without constant scrutiny." Amelia's father made a sound of surprise. "Your Grace, you are asking me to allow my unmarried daughter to reside under your roof. Surely you understand how such an arrangement could be misconstrued." "I do understand," Alfred said seriously, "which is why I am asking rather than expecting. I give you my word as a gentleman that I will treat your daughter with absolute respect. If at any point you are uncomfortable, we will return immediately to London." "And what happens after this fortnight?" Amelia asked. "Assuming we agree, assuming the time goes well, what then?" Alfred's expression grew serious. "I cannot promise you the future you might hope for. Not yet. The obstacles are real. But I can promise this. If we discover during those 2 weeks that what we felt was real and lasting, I will fight for it. I will face my advisors, weather the scandal, endure whatever I must. I cannot guarantee that we will win, but I can guarantee that I will try." The room fell silent, except for the ticking of the clock. Amelia looked at her father, trying to read his expression. Finally, her father spoke. "I will agree to this, but with conditions. First, my daughter will have her own locked chambers. Second, there will be servants present at all times in common areas. Third, you will provide written assurance that my daughter's reputation will be protected." "Agreed to all conditions," Alfred said without hesitation. They settled the details. They would leave in 3 days. When Alfred finally departed, Amelia felt as though she were standing on the edge of something vast and unknown. Her father came to stand beside her at the window. "Are you certain about this, Amelia?" "No," she admitted, "but I think I need to find out what happens next." The journey to the manor was beautiful. They left London behind, travelling through countryside that grew increasingly green and peaceful. Alfred pointed out landmarks, told stories about the region's history, asked her father about his work. It was easy, comfortable, reminiscent of that first afternoon. The manor house appeared as they crested a hill, and Amelia caught her breath. It was smaller than she had imagined a ducal property to be, but beautiful, built of honey-coloured stone, surrounded by carefully tended gardens. Mrs. Henshaw, the housekeeper, greeted them at the door. Amelia's chamber was lovely, with windows overlooking the garden and a lock on the door as promised. Her father was installed next door, close enough to be summoned if needed. That first evening, they dined in a small dining room that felt intimate rather than grand. The conversation flowed naturally, ranging from philosophy to poetry to her father's research. Alfred was knowledgeable and genuinely interested. After dinner, Alfred suggested a walk in the gardens. With her father's permission, Amelia accepted. They strolled along gravelled paths lined with roses, a maid following at a discreet distance. "Thank you for coming," Alfred said, when they were out of earshot of the house. "I was not certain you would." "I was not certain either," Amelia admitted, "but I decided that I would regret not knowing more than I would regret whatever might happen." "A philosophy I am trying to embrace myself," Alfred said. He paused by a stone bench. "Amelia. May I call you Amelia here?" "I think we are past such concerns," she said. "I have been calling you Alfred in my mind since the day we met." He smiled. "Good, because I need you to understand something. When I asked you here, it was not on a whim. I know the obstacles we face, but I also know that I have never felt this way about anyone. So I need to know, is there a possibility that you might feel the same?" Amelia considered seriously. "I spent one afternoon with you, and a few brief visits since. I barely know you. How can I answer that? Then let me ask differently. Do you want to know me better? Because you feel something that wants room to grow?" She turned to face him, meeting his grey eyes. "Yes," she said simply. "I feel something. It frightens me, because I know all the reasons why it cannot work, but it is there nonetheless." Alfred released a breath. "Then we have a beginning, and that is more than I dared to hope for." The days at the manor unfolded with a rhythm that felt both dreamlike and intensely real. Amelia woke each morning to birdsong, took breakfast where Alfred joined her and her father, then spent hours in ways that seemed designed to reveal themselves to each other. Alfred proved to be a man of unexpected depths. In the mornings he often worked in the estate office. Amelia sometimes sat with him there, reading while he wrote, finding comfort in the companionable silence. He would occasionally share some amusing detail from his correspondence. She learned that he had a dry wit that revealed itself in quiet moments. In the afternoons, they walked. Alfred showed her the folly on the hill. They climbed to the top and looked out over the countryside, and Alfred told her about growing up with the weight of his title, about the loneliness of being groomed for power, while everyone around him performed roles without truly knowing him. "I was 14 when my father died," he said one afternoon. "Everyone suddenly looked at me differently. I was no longer simply Alfred. I was the Duke of Ashford, with estates across England, a seat in Parliament, influence over thousands of lives. And I had no idea how to be that person. How did you learn? Amelia asked. By watching, by making mistakes that my advisors covered up, by slowly building a mask I could wear in public, the Stone Duke, as they call me, a man who never shows weakness, who always knows the right thing to do. He turned to look at her. That rainy afternoon when I met you, I had been wearing that mask all morning. I was walking to escape it, to remember what it felt like to simply be. And then there you were. Do you have any idea what a gift that was? I think I am beginning to understand, Amelia said softly. He reached for her hand, then hesitated. Instead, he rested his hand on the stone between them, close enough that she could have touched it. These days with you have been the most peaceful I can remember. Amelia did reach out then, laying her hand over his. The maid shifted but did not intervene. I feel it too, she admitted. The evenings were Amelia's favorite time. After dinner, the three of them gathered in the library. They played chess, argued about philosophy, read poetry aloud. Alfred had a good reading voice, and he brought Wordsworth to life in ways that made Amelia see the poems anew. Her father and Alfred developed an easy rapport, bonding over their shared love of history. One evening, after her father had retired, Alfred asked Amelia to stay a moment longer. The maid remained by the fire, but Alfred drew Amelia to the far end of the library. I need to tell you something, he began. I received a letter from London today. My advisors have learned where I am. They are concerned about scandal, about what might be said. They are pressuring me to return immediately. Amelia felt her stomach tighten. What does that mean? It means they worry about my reputation, and I should tell you, they have begun circulating my name in connection with several suitable matches. Ladies of appropriate rank who would make unimpeachable duchesses. He held up a hand before she could speak. Their words, not mine. I see, Amelia said, the words feeling like stones. And what will you do? I will do what I promised. I will stay here for the full fortnight. I will ignore my advisor's demands. And when we return to London, I will make it clear that my intentions toward you are serious. He stepped closer. But Amelia, I need you to understand what that will mean. There will be gossip, possibly cruel. There will be pressure from every quarter. Some people will treat you badly simply because you threaten their plans. Are you warning me away? Amelia asked. No, he said firmly. I am warning you what you are walking into, so you can make an informed choice. Because once we leave here, once I make my intentions public, there will be no going back. Amelia thought about the quiet life she had always known, the comfortable obscurity. She thought about stepping into society's glare, being judged by people who would never know her. But when she looked at Alfred, at the hope and fear in his expression, she knew her answer. I am not afraid of gossip, she said. I am only afraid of regret. Something in Alfred's face shifted. You are remarkable, he said softly. My father occasionally, but he is biased. Alfred laughed genuinely. Then his expression grew serious. There is something else. My father, before he died, arranged a betrothal for me. I was 12, the girl was 10. A political alliance. When I inherited, I could have honored that arrangement. She would have been suitable, intelligent, accomplished, well-connected. But you did not honor it, Amelia said slowly. No. When I reached my majority, I explained that I could not marry someone I had never chosen. They were displeased. The girl, Lady Catherine Ashworth, has since married someone else happily. But my refusal created enmity with her family. They have worked against my interests in Parliament ever since. Why are you telling me this now? Because I want you to understand that I have already sacrificed political advantage for the sake of making my own choice. Refusing that match cost me dearly. But I have never regretted it because marrying someone I did not choose would have been a betrayal of who I hoped to be. He took her hands. I am telling you this because when I speak of fighting for you, I am not speaking hypothetically. I have done it before. I will do it again. That night, Amelia could not sleep. She lay in bed replaying their conversation. Alfred had revealed so much, his loneliness, his past defiance of expectation, his willingness to face consequences. and she realized that what she felt for him had grown far beyond that initial connection. The remaining days at the manor took on new urgency. They both knew their time apart from the world was ending. But instead of letting that knowledge dampen their time, it seemed to intensify everything. Their conversations grew deeper, more revealing. One afternoon, as they walked through the rose garden, Alfred said, "I could help with that, not by imposing my will or expecting you to become someone you are not, but by providing resources, connections, opportunities. You mentioned wanting to write. I know publishers. You spoke of travel. I have properties across Europe. If you were my wife, those resources would be yours." "Is that a proposal?" Amelia asked, her heart racing. "Not yet," Alfred said. "When I propose to you, and I will, I want to do it properly. Not here in secret, but in London, with full knowledge of what it means. But I am telling you now that my intentions lead in that direction." "Alfred, Amelia stopped walking. "I care for you deeply, but I need you to be completely certain. Once you make such a declaration public, there will be no retreating." "I am certain," he said without hesitation. "I have never been more certain of anything." The day before they were to return to London, Amelia's father asked to speak with her privately. They walked in the early morning, and her father got straight to the point. "Do you love him?" he asked. Amelia did not hesitate. "Yes." "And do you believe he loves you?" "I think he does, or that he is falling in love with me as I am with him." Her father nodded slowly. "I have been watching you both carefully. I have seen how he looks at you, how he listens when you speak. He is not a man who acts on whim. If he has decided to pursue you despite all obstacles, he has done so with full awareness." "Are you saying you approve?" Amelia asked, surprised. "I am saying I trust your judgment, and his. I am also saying that if you choose this path, I will support you completely. Whatever gossip comes, whatever doors close, you will always have a home with me." They returned to London on a grey morning. As the carriage rolled through increasingly familiar streets, Amelia felt anxiety building. Here, in the countryside, they had existed in their own bubble. But London was real. London had eyes and tongues and unforgiving rules. Alfred seemed to sense her nervousness. He reached across briefly, squeezing her hand in reassurance. When they arrived at Amelia's home, Alfred handed her and her father out personally. Then, in full view of any neighbours watching, he bowed deeply to Amelia. "Miss Blackthorne," he said, his voice carrying, "thank you for accepting my hospitality. I will call on you tomorrow. There are matters we need to discuss." "I will be home, Your Grace," Amelia replied. Before they could go inside, Mrs. Henderson appeared, eyes alight with curiosity. "Was that the Duke of Ashford?" she asked breathlessly. "My dear Miss Blackthorne, I had no idea you were acquainted with such an elevated personage. We met recently," Amelia said carefully. Inside, Amelia and her father looked at each other. "And so it begins," her father said. That evening, as Amelia prepared for bed, a note arrived. "The advisers have already begun. 3 came to see me within an hour of my return. They spoke of scandal, of unsuitable matches, of duty. I listened politely, then informed them that my mind was made up. Tomorrow I will call as promised. The day after I will escort you to the theatre, where we will be seen together publicly. Let society draw its own conclusions. I am done hiding what I want." Amelia held the note to her chest. Tomorrow, everything would change. Morning came too quickly and too slowly. Amelia dressed with unusual care, choosing a dress that was modest but flattering, fixing her hair more elegantly than her usual practical arrangement. Her father noticed and smiled, but said nothing. Alfred arrived precisely at 2 o'clock. He was dressed formally, every inch the Duke of Ashford, but when Amelia entered the parlour and saw his face, she saw Alfred beneath the aristocratic bearing, the man from the rain, the man who had chosen her. "Miss Blackthorne," he said, bowing. Then, more quietly, "Amelia." "Your Grace," she replied. "Alfred." Her father discreetly positioned himself by the window with a book, present but granting them as much privacy as propriety allowed. Alfred sat across from Amelia, his posture formal, but his eyes warm. "I want to be completely honest with you about what has happened since our return. My advisors have made their position clear. They believe a match between us would be disastrous for my political standing and social position. Several prominent families have indicated they would withdraw their support if I pursued you. Lady Catherine's family has threatened to actively work against any legislation I support in Parliament. Amelia felt her heart sinking. Alfred, if this will cause such damage. Let me finish, he said gently. They have also made it clear that if I marry someone of appropriate rank, many doors currently closed to me would open. Alliances would be strengthened. Political power would increase. I would have the full support of the aristocracy behind any initiatives I might champion. That sounds compelling, Amelia said quietly. It would be if I cared more about political power than about personal happiness. But Amelia, I have spent my entire life accumulating power and influence, and what has it brought me? Loneliness, a constant sense of performing rather than living, decisions made by committee rather than by heart. And then I met you, and for the first time I understood what I had been missing. So I told my advisors this morning that they could accept my choice or they could resign. Several chose resignation. I have already begun finding replacements. Amelia stared at him. You dismissed your advisors? For me? For us, he corrected. Because I realized that advisors who cannot respect my choices are not truly serving my interests. They are serving their own vision of what I should be. He leaned forward. Amelia, I need you to understand what I'm offering you. Not just my name and title, though those come with it. I'm offering you partnership, a life where we face challenges together, where we make decisions together, where we build something meaningful together. It will not be easy. Society will make things difficult, at least initially, but I believe, I have to believe, that if we are strong enough, we can weather it. You are asking me to marry you, Amelia said, needing to hear it stated plainly. I am, Alfred confirmed. Not today. I am doing this properly, giving you time to consider what it means. But yes, I am asking you to be my wife, to be the Duchess of Ashford, to stand beside me as I navigate the responsibilities of my position while trying to maintain the parts of myself that you helped me rediscover. Amelia's mind was reeling. Duchess of Ashford. It sounded like a character from a novel, not something that could possibly apply to her. Yet here was Alfred, looking at her with such hope and determination that she almost believed it was possible. I need time, she said finally, not because I do not care for you, I do more than I expected, but because this decision affects not just me but my father, and because I need to be absolutely certain I can handle what comes with being your wife. The scrutiny, the expectations, the constant judgment. I understand, Alfred said, though she saw disappointment flicker across his face. Take all the time you need. But Amelia, while you are considering, let me court you properly. Let me show you what our life together could be. Will you allow me to escort you tomorrow evening? There is a production of Hamlet at Drury Lane. We will be seen together, yes, and that will fuel gossip. But it will also be beautiful and meaningful, and a chance for us to experience something together in the world we will have to navigate. Amelia looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, she said. I will go with you. The relief on Alfred's face was palpable. Thank you. I will call for you at 7. After he left, Amelia sat in stunned silence. Her father came to sit beside her, taking her hand. That was quite a proposal. That was not quite a proposal, he observed. Father, am I mad to even consider this? I am the daughter of a scholar. I have no training in being a duchess. I know nothing of managing great estates or navigating high society. I will make mistakes, embarrass him, be a constant source of gossip. You will also be yourself, her father said firmly. Intelligent, thoughtful, kind. Those qualities do not disappear because you acquire a title. And Amelia, that man loves you. I have seen enough of the world to recognize genuine feeling when I see it. He is not pursuing you because of some temporary infatuation. He is pursuing you because you make him feel like himself. That is not a small thing. But what if I fail? What if I cannot be what he needs? Then you will figure it out together. That is what marriage is, my dear. Two people figuring out life together, making mistakes and correcting them, growing in ways neither expected. Your mother was terrified when we married. She had no idea how to be a scholar's wife, how to manage on our modest income. But she learned, and we were happy. You will learn too, and you will have considerably more resources than we did. Amelia leaned against her father's shoulder. I am so afraid, she admitted. Of course you are. You are contemplating a life you never imagined. But fear is not a reason to turn away from something that could be extraordinary. The next evening, Amelia dressed with shaking hands. She wore her best dress, a deep blue silk that her mother had altered for her years ago. It was out of fashion by society's standards, but it suited her. When Alfred arrived, the appreciation in his eyes told her he thought so too. The carriage ride to the theatre was quiet. Alfred seemed nervous, which Amelia found oddly comforting. If he felt the weight of what they were doing, it meant he understood the significance. Are you ready? He asked as they approached Drury Lane, where carriages were already queued and well-dressed patrons were streaming into the theatre. No, Amelia said honestly, but I am here nonetheless. Alfred smiled at that. That is all the bravery I can ask. When they emerged from the carriage, Amelia felt every eye turn toward them. The murmur of conversation died, then surged into whispers. She heard her name, or rather, questions about her name. Who is she? Is that the Blackthorn girl from Bloomsbury? Surely the Duke is not seriously courting her. Alfred offered his arm, and Amelia took it, lifting her chin. They walked into the theatre together, and if Amelia felt like she was walking through fire, she did her best not to show it. They were seated in Alfred's private box, which offered some protection from the stairs, but also made them highly visible. Throughout the first act, Amelia was acutely aware of opera glasses turning in their direction, of conversations being conducted behind fans. Alfred seemed unbothered, his attention apparently focused on the stage, though he occasionally leaned close to make a quiet comment about the performance. During the interval, they remained in the box rather than joining the crowd in the foyer. Alfred had champagne brought, and they stood at the railing looking down at the sea of elegantly dressed people below. There is Lady Catherine, Alfred said quietly, nodding toward a striking woman in emerald silk. My former intended. She appears to have seen us. Indeed, Lady Catherine was looking up at their box with an expression Amelia could not quite read. Then, to Amelia's surprise, the lady smiled and raised her glass in a subtle toast. She bears you no ill will, Amelia observed. No. She understood my position and hers. We have remained cordial. Alfred turned to face Amelia fully. Do you see now what you will be walking into? Every person in this theatre is talking about us. Judgments are being formed, opinions solidified. This is your life if you choose me. I see it, Amelia said. And she did. The curious eyes, the whispered speculations, the sense of being constantly observed and evaluated. It should have terrified her. In some ways it did. But she also felt Alfred's steady presence beside her, felt the rightness of standing here with him, despite all the eyes watching. And I am still here. Something in Alfred's expression shifted, hope blooming into certainty. Amelia Blackthorn, you are extraordinary. I am terrified, she corrected. That too, but the two are not mutually exclusive. The second act of Hamlet played out below them, but Amelia barely registered it. Her mind was occupied with calculations, with imagining the life that Alfred offered. She would be scrutinized constantly. Her every choice would be judged. There would be loneliness in her new station, difficulty connecting with people who would see her title before they saw her. But there would also be Alfred, his intelligence and dry humor, his unexpected kindness, the way he looked at her as though she were someone worth seeing, the partnership he offered, where they could face challenges together rather than alone, the possibility of building something meaningful, of using the resources and influence of his position for purposes beyond mere social climbing. As they left the theatre at the end of the performance, making their way through the crowd, a woman deliberately stepped into their path. She was elderly, elegantly dressed, her bearing unmistakably aristocratic. Alfred stiffened slightly beside Amelia. Your Grace, the woman said, her voice carrying. I see you have brought a companion this evening." "Lady Pemberton," Alfred replied, his tone carefully neutral. "May I present Miss Amelia Blackthorne? Amelia, this is the Dowager Countess of Pemberton, an old friend of my late mother's." The Dowager studied Amelia with sharp eyes, and Amelia felt herself being weighed and measured. Then, unexpectedly, the older woman smiled. "Miss Blackthorne, I have heard whispers about you. They say you are the daughter of a scholar, that you have no fortune or connections to speak of, and that somehow you have captured the attention of England's most eligible duke." "So I am told, my lady," Amelia said, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "They also say," Lady Pemberton continued, "that you are intelligent, well-read, and possessed of uncommon sense, that you speak your mind rather than simpering, that you treat the Duke as a man rather than a title." She paused. "I knew Alfred's mother well. She would have approved of you, I think. She always hoped her son would marry for something more than political advantage." With that pronouncement, Lady Pemberton nodded to them both and moved away, leaving Amelia slightly dazed. Alfred squeezed her hand briefly. "That was significant," he said quietly, as they continued toward their carriage. "Lady Pemberton's approval carries weight. If she has decided to champion you, others will follow." "Why would she do that?" Amelia asked, bewildered. "Because she is tired of watching young people sacrifice happiness for duty," Alfred said, "and because, as she said, my mother would have liked you." The ride home was quiet but comfortable. When they arrived at Amelia's door, Alfred helped her down from the carriage, then stood holding her hand for a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Thank you for tonight," he said, "for your bravery, for standing beside me despite the whispers." "It was not as terrible as I feared," Amelia admitted. "It will be sometimes," Alfred said honestly. "There will be people who are cruel, who refuse to accept you, who make things difficult simply because they can. I cannot shield you from all of that, but I can promise to stand with you through it." "I know," Amelia said, and she realized in that moment that she had already made her decision. The fear was still there, the uncertainty about whether she could truly navigate this new life. But beneath those doubts was something stronger, trust in Alfred, in herself, in the connection between them that had begun in the rain and had deepened with each day they spent together. "Alfred," she said, before she could second-guess herself, "ask me again." He looked at her, understanding immediately what she meant. "Amelia Blackthorne, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my duchess, my partner in navigating whatever challenges lie ahead?" "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will." For a moment, Alfred looked stunned, as though he had not quite believed she would agree. Then joy transformed his face entirely. He raised her hand to his lips, kissing it with such tenderness that Amelia felt tears prick her eyes. "You have made me extraordinarily happy," he said. "I promise you I will spend the rest of my life ensuring you do not regret this choice." "See that you do," Amelia said, trying for lightness, though her voice wavered with emotion. When she went inside, her father was waiting up. He took one look at her face and smiled. "You said yes." "I said yes," Amelia confirmed. "Father, I am about to become a duchess. I do not feel remotely qualified." "No one ever feels qualified for the important things," her father said, embracing her. "But you will learn, just as you have learned everything else. And you will have that young man beside you, supporting you. That matters more than any amount of training." That night, Amelia lay in bed trying to comprehend the magnitude of what she had agreed to. In a matter of weeks, her entire life would change. She would leave this house, her father, everything familiar. She would take on responsibilities she barely understood, enter a world that had every reason to reject her. The fear was real, present, undeniable. But so was the certainty that she was making the right choice. Not the easy choice, not the safe choice, but the right one nonetheless. The next days passed in a whirlwind. Alfred made their engagement public, announcing it in the Times and informing his closest associates. The reaction was mixed, some genuinely pleased, others scandalized, most simply fascinated by the unexpected development. Invitations arrived for Amelia, suddenly in demand by hostesses who wanted to examine the woman who had captured the Duke of Ashford. Lady Pemberton took Amelia under her wing, introducing her to society with the kind of imprimatur that smoothed many potential difficulties. She was frank about the challenges ahead, but also encouraging, telling Amelia that duchesses were made, not born, and that intelligence and grace could compensate for lack of training. Alfred's remaining advisors, those who had not resigned, began helping Amelia understand her future responsibilities. The estates she would help oversee, the charities she would be expected to patron, the social obligations that came with the title. It was overwhelming, but Alfred was always there, explaining, supporting, making it clear that they would navigate this together. Not everyone was welcoming. Some doors remained firmly closed. Certain prominent families made their disapproval known through icy politeness or deliberate snubs. Amelia learned quickly to distinguish between those who would never accept her and those who simply needed time to adjust to the unconventional match. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after their engagement, Amelia received an unexpected caller. Lady Catherine Ashworth arrived at the modest Bloomsbury house, causing quite a stir among the neighbours. Amelia received her with trepidation, uncertain what the woman who might have been Duchess of Ashford wanted to say. "Miss Blackthorne," Lady Catherine said once they were settled in the parlour with tea, "I hope you do not mind my calling. I wanted to speak with you before the wedding." "I confess I am surprised by the visit," Amelia said carefully. Lady Catherine smiled. "I imagine you are. You must understand there was a time when many expected Alfred and me to marry. Our betrothal as children, though never formally renewed once we were of age, hung between us for years. Some people still think we should have honoured it." "I am aware of the situation," Amelia said. "Then let me be clear. I am glad we did not." Lady Catherine leaned forward. "Alfred is a good man, honourable and kind, but we did not love each other. We were friendly, compatible in many ways, but there was no spark, no passion. When he refused the match, I was relieved. I wanted to marry someone I chose, someone who saw me rather than my family connections. I found that with my husband, and now Alfred has found it with you." "Why are you telling me this?" Amelia asked. "Because I want you to understand that not everyone in society is your enemy. Some of us are happy to see Alfred marrying for love rather than duty. And I wanted to offer you friendship if you will accept it. You will need allies in the ton, Miss Blackthorne. I would like to be one of them." Amelia felt something loosen in her chest, gratitude, relief, hope. "I would like that very much, Lady Catherine." They spent the next hour in genuine conversation, and when Lady Catherine left, Amelia felt lighter. Perhaps navigating this new world would not be entirely lonely after all. The wedding was set for 6 weeks after the engagement, enough time to plan appropriately, but not so long that endless anticipation could build. Alfred wanted it sooner. His advisers counselled a longer engagement to allow society to adjust. They compromised on a time frame that satisfied neither party but worked pragmatically. Amelia's father walked her through the preparations, helping her manage the overwhelming array of decisions that came with planning a ducal wedding. Alfred tried to shield her from the worst of it, but there was only so much he could do. The guest list alone was a political minefield, with every invitation or exclusion carrying significance. One evening, about 3 weeks before the wedding, Alfred found Amelia alone in her father's study, surrounded by correspondence and looking overwhelmed. "Tell me what you need," he said, sitting beside her. "A miracle," Amelia said wryly. "Or perhaps just fewer opinions about table arrangements." Alfred laughed. "I am afraid I cannot help with either, but I can offer distraction. Come with me." "Where?" Amelia asked, suspicious. "Trust me." He led her outside, where his carriage waited. They drove through London as evening fell, the city transforming in the fading light. Alfred directed the driver to stop at a familiar street, and Amelia realized with a start where they were. "This is where we met," she said softly. "It is," Alfred confirmed, helping her down from the carriage. They walked to the stone doorway where they had sheltered from the rain, now dry and peaceful in the evening air. "I wanted to come back here, to remember how this started." They stood in the doorway together, and Amelia felt time fold in on itself. She remembered the frightened, uncertain woman who had stood here weeks ago, meeting a stranger in the rain. She thought about everything that had happened since, The revelation of his identity, the fortnight at the manor, the proposal, the whirlwind of engagement. It felt like a lifetime compressed into mere weeks. "Do you regret it?" Alfred asked quietly. "Meeting me that day?" "Never," Amelia said honestly. "Though I will admit that when I rushed into this doorway to escape the rain, I did not expect my life to change so dramatically." "Nor did I," Alfred said. "I was simply trying to delay an appointment. I had no idea I was about to meet the woman I would marry." He turned to face her. "Amelia, in 3 weeks, you will become my wife. And I realize I have spent so much time convincing you that we could weather society's disapproval that I have not told you enough about what I hope our marriage will be, so let me tell you now." He took her hands in his. "I do not want you to simply be my duchess, managing estates and attending functions. I want you to be my partner. I want your thoughts on the decisions I face, your perspective on the problems I wrestle with. I want to support your interests and passions, whatever they may be. If you want to write, I will help you find publishers. If you want to travel, we will travel. If you want to champion causes you believe in, we will use our resources and influence to do so. This marriage is not about you conforming to my life. It is about us building a life together." Amelia felt tears gathering. "You make it sound so simple." "The concept is simple," Alfred said. "The execution will be harder. We will disagree sometimes. We will make mistakes. There will be days when the pressure feels unbearable. But I have to believe, that if we face everything together, we can create something extraordinary." "I believe that too," Amelia said, "though I confess I am still terrified." "Good," Alfred said, surprising her. "Fear means you understand the significance of what we are undertaking. Overconfidence would worry me far more than appropriate nervousness." He pulled her close, and Amelia leaned against him, drawing strength from his steady presence. "We are going to be fine, Amelia, better than fine." Standing there in the doorway where they had met, Amelia let herself believe him. The fear was still there, would likely always be there to some degree, but beneath it was something stronger. Hope, trust, love. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And that, she was discovering, made all the difference. The morning of the wedding arrived with pale sunshine that filtered through clouds heavy with the possibility of rain. Amelia woke early, her stomach a tangle of nerves and anticipation. In a few hours, she would walk down the aisle of St. George's, Hanover Square, and emerge as the Duchess of Ashford. The reality of it felt both immediate and impossible. Her father came to her room as she was being helped into her wedding dress by the lady's maid Alfred had sent to assist her. The dress itself was a marvel. Ivory silk with delicate embroidery, elegant without being ostentatious. Alfred had insisted she choose something she loved rather than what society expected. "You look like your mother," her father said, his voice thick with emotion. "She wore that same expression on our wedding day, terrified and radiant in equal measure." "How did she manage it?" Amelia asked, turning so the maid could adjust her veil. "Walking away from everything she knew, facing society's disapproval. She focused on what mattered," her father said, "not the whispers or the judgment, but the life we were building together. And she reminded herself that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it." Amelia embraced her father carefully, mindful of not crushing her dress. "I am going to miss living with you." "I will be mere streets away," he reminded her gently. Alfred had offered to let him stay at one of the ducal properties, but her father had insisted on maintaining his independence. "And you will visit often, I hope. Someone needs to keep me from disappearing entirely into my manuscripts." The carriage that arrived to take them to the church was elaborately appointed, bearing the Ashford arms. Neighbours gathered to watch Amelia's departure, some genuinely happy for her, others simply curious. Mrs. Henderson wept openly, declaring it the most romantic thing she had ever witnessed. The drive to St. George's was short but felt interminable. Amelia watched London pass by the window, aware that she was seeing it for the last time as simply Miss Blackthorne. When she returned through these streets, she would be a duchess with all the weight that title carried. The church was imposing, its elegant Georgian architecture speaking of power and permanence. Inside, Amelia knew society had gathered, the powerful, the prominent, the curious, all waiting to witness the unlikely marriage between the Duke of Ashford and the scholar's daughter from Bloomsbury. Lady Pemberton met them at the entrance, elegant in silver silk. She had volunteered to help Amelia navigate the ceremony, a kindness that had nearly brought Amelia to tears when offered. "You look beautiful, my dear," Lady Pemberton said, adjusting Amelia's veil with practiced hands. "Now remember what I told you. Walk slowly, keep your head up and focus on the altar. Everyone else is merely scenery." "Easy for you to say," Amelia murmured. "You were not marrying a duke with half of London watching." Lady Pemberton smiled. "No, but I was marrying an earl when I was barely 18, with no more training than you have. And I survived. So will you." The music began, the signal that it was time. Amelia took her father's arm, feeling his hand steady and warm over hers. The doors opened, and suddenly she was walking down an aisle that seemed impossibly long, past rows of faces that blurred into a sea of judgment and curiosity. But then she saw Alfred waiting at the altar, and everything else receded. He was dressed formally in dark wool and pristine white linen, every inch the Duke of Ashford. But when their eyes met, she saw only Alfred, the man from the rain, the man who had chosen her, the man who looked at her now as though she were the only person in the world who mattered. She made her way toward him, her father's presence anchoring her, Lady Pemberton's advice echoing in her mind. Walk slowly, head up, focus on what matters. And what mattered was Alfred, watching her approach with such open emotion that Amelia felt her nervousness begin to transform into something else. Certainty, anticipation, joy. When they reached the altar, her father placed her hand in Alfred's with clear reluctance to let her go. But he did let go, stepping back to take his seat, leaving Amelia standing beside the man she was about to marry. The ceremony proceeded with traditional solemnity. The bishop spoke of duty and honor, of the sacred bonds of marriage, of the responsibilities they were undertaking. Amelia heard the words distantly, focused instead on Alfred's hand holding hers, on the way he looked at her when he spoke his vows, on the weight of the moment settling over them both. When it came time for her to speak, Amelia's voice was clear and steady. "I, Amelia Blackthorne, take thee, Alfred James Montclair, to be my wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love, cherish, and to obey, till death us do part." The traditional words felt newly meaningful, weighted with everything she and Alfred had discussed. This was not merely a ceremony, it was a promise, a choice, a leap of faith. When Alfred spoke his vows in return, Amelia heard in his voice the same awareness of significance. This was real, irrevocable, the beginning of something that would define both their lives. The ring Alfred placed on her finger was beautifully simple, gold with a single sapphire, chosen because he remembered her mentioning it was her favorite stone. The gesture, like so many of his gestures, showed that he paid attention, that he saw her preferences and honored them. And then the bishop was pronouncing them man and wife, and Alfred was lifting her veil and they were kissing, while the congregation watched. It was a brief kiss, proper for the setting, but Amelia felt its promise of everything that would come after. They walked back down the aisle together, husband and wife, duke and duchess. The faces that had been merely curious on her entrance now showed varied reactions, some genuinely pleased, others resigned, a few still clearly disapproving. But Amelia found she cared less than she had expected. Let them approve or disapprove as they chose. She had made her decision, and she would live with its consequences. The wedding breakfast was held at Ashford House, the Duke's London residence that would now be Amelia's home. The mansion was overwhelming in its grandeur, soaring ceilings, priceless artwork, rooms that seemed to extend endlessly. Amelia had visited several times during their engagement, but knowing she would now live here permanently made it feel different, more immediate. The celebration was elegant, but not excessive. Alfred had insisted on keeping the guest list relatively intimate. Only a few hundred people, he had said, with dry humor that made Amelia laugh despite her nerves. Tables were arranged in the grand ballroom, decorated with flowers and crystal that caught the light like captured stars. Amelia and Alfred sat at the head table, receiving congratulations from a parade of guests. Some were sincere, like Lady Pemberton and Lady Catherine, who embraced Amelia and welcomed her to society properly. Others were performative, going through the motions of politeness while their eyes calculated and judged. Amelia learned quickly to distinguish between the two. During a brief lull, Alfred leaned close and whispered, "You are doing wonderfully. I know this must be overwhelming." "It is," Amelia admitted quietly, "but I am surviving. Your friend Lord Stratford just spent 10 minutes telling me about his collection of butterflies. I believe he forgot entirely that I am now a duchess and simply talked to me as a person." "Stratford is like that," Alfred said with affection. "One of the few people who has never cared about my title. You will like him, I think." As the afternoon wore into evening, guests began departing. Those closest to Alfred, the friends and family who genuinely cared for his happiness, stayed longer, and the atmosphere grew more relaxed. Amelia found herself drawn into conversations about books and politics and philosophy, discovering that not all of Alfred's circle were shallow or solely concerned with social climbing. There were intelligent, thoughtful people here, individuals who might become genuine friends given time. When the last guest finally departed, Amelia sagged slightly with relief. Alfred noticed immediately, taking her hand. "It is over," he said gently. "The public performance is done. Now it is just us." "Just us," Amelia repeated, and felt something between relief and new nervousness. They were married now, truly married. This was real, permanent, the beginning of their shared life. Alfred seemed to sense her thoughts. "Amelia, I want to show you something. Will you come with me?" He led her through the maze of Ashford House's corridors to a wing she had not yet explored. At the end of a hallway, he opened a door to reveal a beautiful suite of rooms, a private sitting room, a bedroom, a small library. The spaces were elegantly furnished but felt intimate rather than overwhelming, decorated in soft colors that were welcoming rather than imposing. "These are your rooms," Alfred said. "I had them prepared according to what I have learned of your tastes. The library has books I thought you might enjoy, and there is space for you to add your own collection. The sitting room is yours to arrange as you please, somewhere you can retreat when the demands of being a duchess become too much." Amelia walked through the rooms slowly, touching the spines of books, running her fingers over the soft fabrics, absorbing the thoughtfulness of it all. "This is beautiful, Alfred. But are these not our rooms?" "My chambers adjoin yours through that door," Alfred explained, gesturing to a connecting door, "a traditional arrangement for aristocratic marriages. But I wanted you to have space that was entirely your own. You are not simply being absorbed into my life, Amelia. You are bringing your own life into this marriage, and you deserve space to maintain your own identity." Amelia turned to face him, feeling tears gather. "You keep surprising me. Every time I think I understand how thoughtful you are, you do something that surpasses it." "I promised you partnership," Alfred said simply. "This is what that looks like. Your space, your autonomy, your choices, all while building a shared life together." That night, after the elaborate rituals of the wedding were finally complete, after servants had been dismissed and the vast house had settled into quiet, Amelia and Alfred sat together in her new sitting room. Still in their wedding clothes, they talked late into the night, about the ceremony, about the guests, about the life that lay ahead. "Were you frightened?" Amelia asked at one point. "Walking down the aisle, knowing what you were committing to?" "Terrified," Alfred admitted. "Not of marrying you. I have never been more certain of anything, but of the responsibility of ensuring you do not regret this choice. You have given up so much, Amelia. Your quiet life, your privacy, your father's daily company. I am acutely aware of what I am asking you to sacrifice." "And you have sacrificed too," Amelia reminded him. "Political alliances, the approval of certain circles, the easier path of a conventional match. We are both taking risks, Alfred, but I believe they are worth taking." "I hope I can make you continue to believe that," Alfred said quietly. The first weeks of their marriage were a process of adjustment. Amelia was learning to navigate Ashford House with its endless rooms and multitude of servants. She met with the housekeeper daily, learning the rhythms of managing a household far larger than anything she had experienced. Mrs. Henshaw, the capable woman from the country manor, had been brought to London to help ease the transition, and her familiar presence made things slightly less overwhelming. But it was not just the house that required adjustment. Being a duchess meant constant demands on her time and attention. Invitations arrived daily, each requiring a response calibrated to maintain appropriate relationships. Charities sought her patronage. Tenants from Alfred's various estates needed audiences. There were fittings for new clothes, lessons in precedence and protocol, endless social obligations that could not be ignored. Through it all, Alfred was steadily present. He carved out time each day to be with her, protecting their mornings together, ensuring she had support as she navigated her new role. When she made mistakes, and she made many, he corrected her gently, privately, never embarrassing her before others. One particularly difficult incident occurred about a month into their marriage. Amelia attended a tea hosted by the Duchess of Marlborough, a formidable society matron. Uncertain of the proper protocol, Amelia inadvertently sat in a seat meant for someone of higher precedence, creating an awkward moment that the other guests noticed immediately. The Duchess of Marlborough handled it with icy grace, but Amelia knew she had blundered. She returned to Ashford House mortified, convinced she had humiliated both herself and Alfred. She found him in his study, working through correspondence. When she explained what had happened, Alfred set down his pen and gave her his full attention. "I am sorry," Amelia said miserably. "I have embarrassed you. I should have known the proper precedence, but there are so many rules, so many unwritten expectations." "Amelia, stop," Alfred said gently. "You made a minor error of protocol. It happens to everyone, especially when they are new to society." The Duchess of Marlborough likely did not give it another thought after the moment passed. "But everyone saw, and everyone has made similar mistakes at some point in their lives. Do you know how many errors I made when I first entered Parliament? I once called a viscount by the wrong title in front of a dozen peers. I survived, so will you." "But you were born to this," Amelia protested. "You were trained from childhood to navigate these situations." "I am improvising constantly, hoping I do not make a fool of myself." Alfred came around the desk and took her hands. "You are learning an entirely new way of living, and you are doing so with grace and determination. I am not embarrassed by you, Amelia. I am proud of you. Every day you show courage simply by continuing to try, by not letting fear paralyze you. That matters more than knowing which seat to take at a tea party." Amelia leaned against him, drawing comfort from his steady presence. "Some days I wonder if I am truly cut out for this life." "Some days I wonder the same thing about myself," Alfred admitted, "but we are in this together. When you struggle, I will support you. When I struggle, and I do struggle more than I show, you support me. That is how we will manage, not by being perfect, but by being partners." As the months passed, Amelia began to find her footing. She discovered that being a duchess, while demanding, also came with certain freedoms she had not anticipated. She had resources now to pursue interests that had previously been constrained by limited means. She began working with several charities focused on education for girls, using her position to draw attention and funding to causes she believed in. She started writing, essays at first, then longer pieces exploring social issues she cared about. Alfred connected her with publishers, but it was her own voice and vision that made her work compelling. She also discovered that not all of society was hostile to her. Once the initial scandal of her unconventional marriage faded, people began to know her as herself rather than as an anomaly. Some remained cold, but others warmed to her genuine nature, her intelligence, her clear devotion to Alfred and his work. She developed friendships with women like Lady Catherine and several others who appreciated authenticity over pretense. Her relationship with Alfred deepened in ways she had not fully anticipated. The early intensity of their courtship evolved into something more complex and textured. They learned each other's rhythms, discovered how to navigate disagreements without damaging the fundamental trust between them. They found joy in small moments, shared breakfasts, evening walks, conversations that ranged from politics to philosophy to the mundane details of daily life. There were difficult days, certainly. Days when the weight of her position felt crushing, when she missed the simplicity of her former life, when the constant scrutiny became unbearable. Days when Alfred's responsibilities pulled him away for weeks at a time, leaving her to manage alone. Days when they argued about decisions that affected them both, struggling to balance individual needs against shared goals. But there were also moments of profound connection. The evening Alfred returned from a difficult session in Parliament and simply held her, drawing comfort from her presence. The morning she presented him with her first published essay, and he read it with tears in his eyes. The countless small ways they learned to support each other through the challenges of their complicated lives. About a year into their marriage, Amelia discovered she was pregnant. The news brought joy mixed with new anxieties. A child meant an heir to Alfred's title, a continuation of the lineage he represented. It also meant new pressures, new expectations, new ways society would judge her. When she told Alfred, she saw his face transform with such pure happiness that her own fears momentarily receded. "We are going to be parents," he said wonderingly. "Amelia, you have given me so much already, but this, we are in this together," Amelia reminded him, echoing his words from months earlier. "This child is ours, Alfred, not just your heir, but our daughter or son, a person we will raise together, teach together, love together." "Yes," Alfred agreed, pulling her close. "Our child. I like the sound of that." The pregnancy proceeded smoothly, though it brought new challenges. Amelia had to navigate society's expectations for pregnant duchesses while also managing her own interests. She refused to simply retire into confinement as was traditional, instead continuing her charitable work and writing until the final weeks. Lady Pemberton became an invaluable source of guidance, having raised several children of her own. "Do not let them frighten you with dire predictions and endless rules," she advised Amelia one afternoon over tea. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. Trust your instincts and choose your own path." When Amelia's labor began on a rainy November evening, exactly a year after the rainstorm where she and Alfred had first met, she found herself thinking about how much had changed. That frightened woman standing in a doorway had become a duchess, a wife, about to become a mother. The journey had been harder than she could have imagined, but also richer, more meaningful. Alfred stayed with her through the long night, defying convention. He held her hand through the worst of the pain, whispered encouragement when she flagged, refused to leave despite the scandalized protests of the attending physician and midwife. When their daughter finally arrived with the dawn, tiny and perfect and loudly proclaiming her entrance into the world, Amelia looked at Alfred's face and saw everything she needed to see. This man who had been the Duke of Ashford before he was anything else had become a husband, a partner, and now a father. And the love in his eyes as he looked at their child was matched only by the love he turned on Amelia. "What shall we name her?" Alfred asked softly, holding their daughter with careful reverence. "Eleanor," Amelia said, "after your mother, if that pleases you." "It pleases me greatly," Alfred said, his voice rough with emotion. "Eleanor Blackthorne Montclair. She has a good, strong name." "She will need it," Amelia said with a tired smile. "Growing up as your daughter, as my daughter, the expectations will be enormous." "Then we will teach her what you have taught me," Alfred said, "that expectations are merely other people's opinions, and what matters is choosing your own path with courage and conviction." In the weeks after Eleanor's birth, Amelia experienced the peculiar isolation that came with new motherhood, the demands that kept her awake at all hours, the overwhelming responsibility of caring for such a tiny, dependent being. But she also experienced unexpected joy. Eleanor was healthy and thriving, and watching Alfred with their daughter revealed new dimensions to the man she had married. He was patient and gentle, unafraid of the messiness that came with babies. He took his turn walking the floors when Eleanor would not sleep, sang to her in his surprisingly good voice, read to her from books she was far too young to understand. Amelia would find him in the nursery at odd hours, simply watching their daughter sleep with wonder written across his face. Society, as expected, had opinions about how they should raise Eleanor. Alfred's remaining advisers suggested hiring nurses and governesses, maintaining appropriate distance, as was customary among the nobility. But Amelia and Alfred chose a different path. While they did employ excellent staff, they remained actively involved in Eleanor's daily care, present in ways that raised eyebrows, but which felt right to them. "Let them whisper," Alfred said when Amelia mentioned the gossip. "Our daughter will grow up knowing her parents, not just seeing them at designated hours. That is worth any amount of scandal." As Eleanor grew from infant to toddler, Amelia found herself reflecting on the journey she had taken. Sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet and Eleanor was sleeping soundly, she would stand at her sitting room window looking out at the London streets. She thought about that rainy afternoon, about the woman she had been and the woman she had become. She was not the same person who had rushed into a doorway to escape a storm. That Amelia had been brave in small ways, but also constrained, uncertain of her place in the world. The woman she had become had learned to navigate a life far more complex and demanding than she could have imagined. She had made mistakes, certainly. There were still days when she felt inadequate to her position, when the weight of being a duchess felt crushing. But she had also discovered strength she had not known she possessed. One evening, about 2 years into their marriage, Alfred found Amelia in her library, working on an essay about educational reform. He sat down beside her, picking up the pages she had already written and reading them with clear appreciation. "This is excellent," he said. "You are arguing for universal education, regardless of class or gender. It will be controversial." "Most worthwhile things are," Amelia replied. "I have learned that much from being your wife." Alfred smiled at that. "Have I told you recently how extraordinary you are?" "Not today," Amelia said, "though you did mention it yesterday and the day before that. I'm beginning to think you mean it." "I've always meant it," Alfred said seriously. "Amelia, do you remember that day in the rain when we first met?" "Of course, how could I forget?" "I think about it often. How easily I might have missed you. If I had walked a different street, if I had been slightly faster or slower, if the rain had begun 5 minutes earlier or later, all the small chances that had to align perfectly for us to meet in that moment." "Fate," Amelia suggested. "Perhaps, or perhaps simply extraordinary luck. Either way, I'm grateful for that rainstorm, for my attempt to delay an appointment, for your habit of walking without noticing the sky. I am grateful for every small thing that brought you into my life." Amelia set down her pen, turning to face him fully. "Do you know what I am grateful for? That you had the courage to reveal who you really were. You could have kept that secret, let our acquaintance fade into nothing. But you chose honesty, even knowing it would complicate everything. That choice made all of this possible." "I had no choice," Alfred said simply. "Not really. From the moment we met, I knew I could not let you go without trying." They sat together in comfortable silence, years of shared life creating an ease between them that needed no words. Eleanor could be heard in the next room, laughing at something her nurse had said. The sounds of the house settling for the evening filtered through the walls. Outside, rain had begun to fall again, tapping against the windows in a rhythm that reminded Amelia of that first afternoon. "It is raining," she observed. "So it is," Alfred said, moving to stand beside her at the window. "Shall we go stand in a doorway somewhere, see if lightning strikes twice?" Amelia laughed. "I think we have had quite enough unlikely encounters for one lifetime, though I would not mind a walk in the rain if you are amenable." "With proper coats and umbrellas this time?" Alfred asked. "Where would be the adventure in that?" They slipped out of the house like truants, leaving Eleanor in the capable hands of her nurse, and walked through the rain-slicked streets of London. It was foolish, really. 2 adults with a dozen responsibilities between them, risking pneumonia for the sake of nostalgia. But it was also necessary, a reminder of where they had started, of the connection that had survived everything thrown against it. They found themselves, without consciously planning it, back at the stone doorway where they had first met. It looked exactly the same, weathered, solid, unremarkable, except for what had happened there. They stood in the shelter of its arch, watching rain fall just as they had years before, and Amelia felt time collapse in on itself. Past and present existed simultaneously, the uncertain woman and the established duchess occupying the same space, same moment. "Do you regret it?" Alfred asked quietly. "The choice you made that day when you agreed to marry me?" Amelia considered the question seriously, as she always did when he asked it. Because he did ask it periodically, needing reassurance that she had not sacrificed too much, that their gamble had been worth taking. And every time she examined their life honestly before answering. "No," she said finally. "I do not regret it. It has been harder than I anticipated, certainly. There have been moments when I missed my former life's simplicity. But Alfred, I would not trade what we have built together for anything. The life we share, the love between us, our daughter, the work I am able to do because of the resources and position your name provides, all of that is worth the difficulties." "Even the gossip?" Alfred pressed. "Even the people who still treat you as an interloper?" "Even that," Amelia confirmed, "because I have learned something important these past years. Society's opinion matters far less than I thought it did. What matters is whether I can look at myself in the mirror and feel proud of who I am, of the choices I have made. And I can. I am not perfect, Alfred. I make mistakes constantly. But I am trying to use what I have been given, this unexpected position, this platform for good. And I am loving you and Eleanor, with everything I have. That is enough." Alfred pulled her close, and they stood together in the doorway as rain fell around them. The city moved past them, carriages splashing through puddles, people hurrying under umbrellas, the endless motion of London life. But in their small shelter, time seemed to pause. "I love you," Alfred said simply. "I loved you when you were Miss Blackthorne asking uncomfortable questions. I love you more now as my wife, my partner, the mother of my child. And I will love you still tomorrow, and next week, and next year. That is the one thing I am absolutely certain about." "I love you too," Amelia replied. "Even when you are being impossibly noble and making me feel like I should be a better person." "You are already the best person I know," Alfred said. They stood there until the rain began to ease, reluctant to leave the space that held such significance for them both. Finally, practical concerns intruded. Eleanor would need them soon, and standing in the rain all evening, while romantic, was not particularly sensible. But as they walked back to Ashford House hand in hand, Amelia felt deeply content. Their story had started in the rain, with a chance encounter and a carefully hidden identity. It had evolved through revelation and challenge, through society's judgment and their own determination. And it continued now in the daily work of building a life together, unglamorous, sometimes difficult, but fundamentally meaningful. She thought about the woman she had been standing nervously in that doorway and wished she could tell her past self what lay ahead. Not to frighten her, but to reassure her, to say that the leap of faith would be worth taking, that the risk would pay dividends she could not yet imagine, that the man offering her shelter from the storm would also offer her shelter through every storm that followed. In the years that came after, their life continued to evolve and deepen. Eleanor grew into a bright, curious child who inherited her mother's love of books and her father's sense of responsibility, tempered with compassion. Amelia's writing gained recognition, her essays on social reform influencing conversations far beyond her immediate circle. Alfred's work in Parliament benefited from her perspective, from her ability to see issues through the lens of those without power or privilege. They faced challenges, certainly. Political battles that Alfred lost despite his best efforts, social snubs that still stung even years into their marriage, moments of doubt, of wondering whether they had chosen correctly. But they faced everything together, drawing strength from their partnership, from the foundation they had built in those early days when everything had been uncertain. And when people asked Amelia, as they often did, whether she regretted her choice, whether she missed her simpler life, whether the difficulties had been worth it, she always gave the same answer. Every moment with him has been worth it, every challenge, every struggle, every sacrifice, because some loves are worth fighting for. Some connections transcend logic and circumstance, and some rainy afternoons change your life forever if you are brave enough to let them. She would pause then and smile, and add one more thing. He was just a kind gentleman in the rain. I didn't know he was the powerful Duke, but I am grateful I met him exactly as I did, without pretense, without performance, just two people being honest in a doorway while the storm raged outside. That honesty was the foundation of everything that followed, and it remains our foundation still. Dear listeners, Thank you so much for joining us on Amelia and Alfred's journey. From that chance encounter in the rain to the beautiful life they built together. Their story reminds us that true love requires courage, that happiness is worth fighting for, and that the most meaningful connections often begin in the most unexpected ways. If this story touched your heart, we would be so grateful if you would subscribe to Echoes of Romance. Leave us a comment sharing your thoughts and hit that like button. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue bringing you these beautiful love stories. And please activate your notifications so you never miss a new tale of romance and courage. Until next time, may you find your own extraordinary love in the most ordinary moments.